Hi, everyone, and welcome to another edition of our Learn from the Experts video series, where today we're going to be talking about taking advantage of resources for students in the middle school years and some things that students and parents should be thinking about when their students are in middle school. So today we're talking with Jack O'Keefe. Jack is the Director of Counseling and Student Success at Catholic Memorial School. And he'll be leading us in a discussion and answering some questions and talking about some things that you should be aware of. So, Jack, appreciate the time. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate being featured among the experts. It's going to be a great conversation. I'm looking forward to it.
Absolutely. So, Jack, before we get started, can you tell our viewers a little bit about Catholic Memorial School and maybe one or two pieces of information they should know about?
Sure. I think, just from a broad overview, we're a 7 through 12 private all-boys Catholic school in Boston, Massachusetts. What I think makes us unique as a school is it's a very inclusive community. Roughly 30% of our students identify as people of color, 30% of our faculty identify as people of color. So we have students who come from over 100 different zip codes, people from a lot of different backgrounds all coming together. And we really focus when working with students on that relational learning of trying to get to know who they are and what drives them. And that's the way that ultimately we see that translate into the classroom and how they perform. That really, if you feel like there are adults in the building who you know, who you trust, who you can be yourself with, and that you can be vulnerable with, that's how you can really identify what matters to you. And that's how you can grow, which leads into the college process, but really it leads just into a growth in humanity process. So it's a great place. I love being there and I love having these conversations about what we do.
That's great, Jack. And as someone who's been to campus many times and has seen kind of firsthand, I can attest to everything that Jack has said and kind of the inclusive environment that is on campus for sure. So Jack, today we're talking all about school students and their parents and kind of how they can start to take advantage of and start thinking about college and what to prepare for really after high school. And so, for many students and their families, middle school is really kind of the first time they're seriously talking about college and starting to think about that next phase after K through 12. So in your experience, what are some of the best ways that students and families can learn about the college experience when they're, that age? And are there any events and resources at Catholic Memorial that introduce students and families, but, also in general that you know about?
Absolutely. And I think what happens at a place like CM, right? When you're coming in, there's often almost a subconscious acknowledgement that like, this is a place where you are preparing for college. And so whether or not a student is overtly talking about college or thinking about it, when you're at a college prep school, there's going to be a lot of messaging that really seeps into their consciousness about this is a place where you're preparing for what comes next. And so whether or not your student is talking to you about college at this point, they are thinking about it. And what that messaging is something to be aware of. Where I would kind of push middle school parents is that we're not necessarily in a place where you have to be introducing them because they're watching TV, they're seeing movies, they're seeing all this other messaging that might be happening in school. But you want to make college seem more accessible and that like you are a person who is going to go to college and that it's not some mythical tower off in the distance that's up on a pedestal that there are so many things you have to do to get there that you can't really reach it. Instead, college is something that it's a natural thing. It comes up. And so for a lot of our students, we just start building in those middle school years, you're going to go to college, right? Like if you want to go, you're going to go. And now we're just starting to get into where do you want to go? And I think it's more of what are we identifying as a match for you? If I'm thinking about what a parent can be doing with their student as they're going through those years, again, trying to make it natural, right? We're in Boston. So, I mean, if you're going to a game at Fenway Park, you can walk through BU's campus, you can walk through Northeastern's campus, and it's not going on a college tour, but it's, we are here, there's a college there, this is what college looks like. And I think wherever you are, that's probably a pretty accessible, low threshold of just, that's what college looks like. Again, it's not this mythical other thing. In terms of the programming that we do for a school, I think we take two very different lanes because for students, again, we don't want to burden them when there's already messaging of college, right? Like we don't want to make college a fearful thing. So we're just keeping those doors open as much as we possibly can. With parents, we want to give them programming that makes sure that they know, again, that doors aren't closed before they open. There's a lot of scary things out there about college, mostly around what it costs. And I think that's when doing, we have programs about how you plan to pay for college. We have programs with parents about how you can start exploring different things. And we have those conversations either at a group level, at a programming level that's open to a whole wide grade, or it might just be a one-on-one with a parent and a counselor where you can have that conversation of, these are what some of our goals are, and kind of just do that parenting double check that's reassuring as a parent of, this is what we're doing, we're on the right track, right? Where we don't want to be pushing our kid too hard, and we also don't want to be backing off so much that it's just like, we'll figure it out when we figure it out, because I don't know I don't think either of those are fair to the student. So it is, those middle school years, we start to create a little bit of a path, but we're definitely not paving things so clearly that it's like there's only one way to go.
Yeah, I think that's great. And kind of the speaking from the two different audiences is great, right? For the students, I love that idea, kind of the low hanging fruit, getting onto a college campus, just kind of exploring, and then knowing that, yeah, it is part of the conversation already. And so, how are we just refining and supporting that? And then for the parents, that early experience and, whether it's in the group or individual conversations, I think is great. And the more we talk about it and, the less scary it becomes, right? Because exactly. I think that's, especially as you mentioned from the financing angle, that can certainly be, give parents some angst there for sure. So, kind of staying in the same lane and talking a little bit about students, we also know that middle school is a time when students start to explore their interests and further develop skills, whether inside or outside the classroom, and that really support lifelong learning. And certainly it doesn't start in middle school, but it starts to really, start to get refined. And we know that for some of these students, these interests and skills may support a future college path, whether directly or kind of indirectly. And so, can you talk about some of the resources that are available to students, either at CM or what you're, familiar with, that help students uncover these skills and interests, and what are some ways that they can take advantage of them?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, right, wherever your student is going to school, what they're experiencing, that's the best feedback that you can have, right? Like, just at its core, the school that they are going to, for better or for worse, the things that they like about it and the things that they wish they could change about it, you're starting to see some trends that probably are going to be with them for the rest of their life, right? So if we're a small Catholic school and we have very small intentional conversations, and you have lots of faculty on top of you, and you have a lot of relationship building, there are some students that drives them crazy. And when they graduate, the first thing they want to do is go to a huge state school where they can, like, okay, cool, I've got it, I can blend in. In the middle school years, though, it might be, hey, I really enjoy going to football games, or I really enjoy my science class. I have this group of friends and all we want to do is sit around and talk about the book that we're reading, because you start to have a little bit more blending of those friend groups where kids can gravitate not to who's my neighbor or who's in my second grade class, but really like, these are the kids who participate in the same extracurricular as I do. And when students are doing that, they start to unlock kind of what matters most to them and what they care about. So I would push students in that way. At Catholic Memorial, we have a great program we call Critical Making, which is really kind of an engineering mindset course. It's a design build course where we want students to kind of, again, move into that middle school or high school thinking where I'm answering a question, but I don't have the same walls that I might have had in an elementary school class. I can explore what I want, and things are wide open for me to pick what I want and then take those. Any assignment or project like that where there's student choice, those are the things as a parent, I think, that you're paying attention to, right? What are the things that are starting to pull your student to say, okay, those are the pathways that we want to explore? Because unfortunately, with college counseling or college admissions and the college experience that a lot of students go through, they approach it from what we call a deficit mindset, which is this, you're looking at a highly selective school and you have to have all these things to get in. And there's this checklist and you see the kids who get in and they seem like these superhumans. And you look at yourself or your student and you say, oh my gosh, look at this checklist of things that we have to pick up. And so kids are taking cello lessons and they're trying to be the quarterback of the football team. And they're learning how to speak Mandarin. If you're passionate about all those things, great. If you're not, don't burn a kid out by doing that. And I think trying to find those early 6th, 7th, and 8th grade things that the kid is really interested in and nurturing those passions, you're going to hear a lot of different things from college admissions people. But one thing that is sincere and authentic every time is passion. And if a kid is passionate about what they do and the thing that they care about, that is going to come through more than the resume that has 15 things at this level. Just dive deep. So you see that starting to emerge in middle school. And that's what's really exciting about those years is you get a little bit of a preview about who the kid is going to become and just saying like, great, here's the opportunity. Let's make sure that we grow from that space.
I've never heard the deficit mindset, I think is such an interesting way. And it's so true to think about kind of, when you get to that point in applying and, you hit on so many good things, but really kind of the student choice, the critical kind of thinking that students are starting to develop and really kind of exploring those passions. And I think it's so important to hear, especially from someone like yourself who works closely with students and families that, just kind of acknowledging that there could be burnout, right? And so kind of just being aware that that is a real thing, and, figuring out what would work best for the student and dive deep in a few and not surface level on a bunch, I guess is a way to say it.
I mean, especially in middle school, if you're creating a list in middle school, if you're using specific college names in middle school, that is overwhelming, right? And there is a college out there, if you're a kid who loves Harry Potter and Minecraft and kind of a few different eccentric things that feels like, there's a college out there that is a perfect match for you. I think it is more finding the college that matches who your student is rather than saying, we need to go to this college. And so we're going to build a student to match those. Like, let the kid be the kid.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, and I know we're talking mostly middle school, but how about younger students? I think that some of these things could maybe apply, but, we know certainly that college prep and selection process is even further away for students that are, before 6th grade. But are there things that parents can do with children in younger grades? I mean, you already kind of mentioned a little bit about just kind of walking on a college and getting that experience. Are there other things that, even before middle school parents could do?
I'm a huge fan of camps, right?
Yeah.
Like in summertime, whether your kid plays baseball or whether your kid really wants to build something or your kid just wants to explore nature, I mean, there's going to be a camp for that. Right. And if you're within driving distance of a college, taking a look at that college's summer programs and saying, maybe go walk around there, right? I grew up across the street from a college. I mean, in our summer, we would just go and walk around and play on the campus. And we would go to the gym, right? Yeah. It was just a very natural college as a part of our community. And I think that's a way of looking at them. But I mean, if you're a parent or you're an alum of a school, take your kid to a football game, right? Like take your kid to a performance, walk onto a campus and again, park a little bit farther away than maybe you need to, or schedule your meal so you're eating on or close to campus, right? I think there's something that is so exciting and optimistic about college at its core of who we could be and who we could grow into. And I think that's what we really want to encourage students, especially at the younger years, to think of it, right? Like at some point, you're going to be a big enough kid, you can make your own choice about who you're going to be and you can go wherever you want. I mean, that is just a powerful message that we can share. As parents, I think that's intimidating because we hear however you want or wherever you want, and we're thinking of the cost of it, right? So there's, again, like as a parent, you can kind of say, these are the things we're concerned about and we'll handle them in our own time. But really, like, let's keep as many doors open for as long as possible for a kid. They'll close eventually, right? Like sophomore, junior year, there are going to be things that come off the table, and that's fine. But I mean, if a kid's in 5th grade, sky's the limit, right? So there's nothing that you can look at that's bad. So again, just the more experiences they have, the better.
Yeah, I think that's great. And your personal experience, I think, is awesome too. Kind of, just again, just being on campus, just, kind of it becomes more natural, it becomes something that is just, kind of second nature to the students, and even from a young age. And I think from the parent standpoint, I'll just make a quick plug here. I think that's one of the things obviously that we're concerned about, and I know that kind of broadly based, the importance of kind of saving early and starting early, because I think as the students are exploring, if at all, the parents can kind of get ahead of the game and kind of think about financial planning, even just saving a little bit, that can, relieve some of the angst too, hopefully, which is what we talk about.
I saw a study at one point. I think it was, I forget where it came from, maybe Freddie Mac, but it was like, they were talking about who is most likely to eliminate a college from a student's list because of cost. And it was including the college counselor, the student, the parent, as like the three primary groups. And overwhelmingly, the person that's most likely to cross the school off the list is the student, which tells me, right, that there are probably things that parents think that they can afford, but they, like, however those conversations are happening, the student just says, I can't go there, that's going to cost too much, which is like, how you can talk about it as a parent so your student feels empowered, and not just like, I heard Uncle Joe talking at the barbecue about how much college costs. Like, I'm not going to go to college now. Like, Uncle Joe doesn't know. Mom and dad have the bank account. Mom and dad are doing the home.
Right. Absolutely. And, it does make sense too. And it's kind of, the more that we can talk about and kind of get ahead of it, I think that's, will just serve everyone better in the long run, for sure.
Yeah.
So I want to transition a little bit and talking about, so, we've talked about kind of introduction to college and kind of keeping it top of mind, interests and skills that starts to develop, and things that younger students can do. As we kind of move from middle school into high school, and thinking about eventually college, we know that the high school transcript is an important piece of the college application. And really, for many students, the classes that they take in high school are first discussed in their later middle school years. So, kind of eighth grade in particular. So could you talk a little bit about, for a student that is hoping to pursue a particular college path, how their class schedule in high school might impact that college path? And then, working with their school counselors, how can they set up a class schedule that really supports kind of their college goals, if they know them for sure, or even if they just have a general idea of, okay, this is what I want to do in college and study in college. How can I set up my high school classes to support that?
I think first and foremost, right, there are all these check marks that we hear about college of, oh, this year really matters, right? And that begins with ninth grade. Like, oh, you're in high school now. This year really matters. They all matter. They matter at a different level. There are plenty of colleges and universities that don't include freshman grades when they factor GPA, because they say this is a transition year. And there are plenty of colleges and universities that do include freshman year. So it all matters. Take it that way. It kind of depends on what school you're in, and how to consider that, and how to work with the people that are on your student's team to support them. I would say first and foremost, you're looking at core subjects, right? English, social studies, math, science, a language. Make sure that I don't know how much school choice any student might have, or course choice, but making sure that you have that core together is going to give you the most options later on if you don't know what you want to do yet. If you are kind of forecasting out and saying, I know my kid is going to be interested in engineering or computer science, or, you could start saying like, okay, have a conversation with a college counselor. These are what some of our family goals are. What does that pathway look like at this school, right? Because there's going to be what we on the high school side, and when we're kind of discussing our program with colleges, we talk about, well, what is our most rigorous track? What is, a very rigorous track, and kind of all the way down. So having a little bit of a sense of what is the most rigorous coursework at this school, and how does my child access it, if that's their area of interest, right? And I have conversations with incoming freshmen sometimes that are just that laser focus. I know I'm
Hmm.
going to be a STEM kid and I want to have this. Where it's like, okay, great. Like, let's make sure that you're in those courses. If you
Right.
have a prior performance that merits honors placement, let's make sure that you're
Hmm.
in honors classes. How do we balance your schedule so you're not burnt out, right? Like maybe you're
Hmm.
taking a step back in a history class, also fine. Um, but there's plenty of students where it's kind of, okay, let's make sure across the board you're in the classes that are appropriate to your level.
Right.
As a parent, I think something, and again, this is going to depend on the school and what your experience is, but I mean, we're coming out of the pandemic and hybrid learning and remote learning, and every school has been different. And if you're, I mean, especially if you're transferring from one middle school to a different high school, either
Hmm.
switching districts, switching into a different private school, whatever it may be, there are all sorts of different ways that students are placed. It does not hurt to ask, right? Like we're all
Right.
respectful people and we're kind to each other, and it's not going to be, my kid has to have this. But if a student is placed at a level that doesn't feel like it's appropriate, having the conversation to say, hey, can we maybe reconsider this? Because there's going to be a lot of different data points that people like me are looking at when we're placing a student in courses, that we could be
Right.
looking at, what is an overall year where maybe that was a hybrid year? What was an
Hmm.
overall year when a student was in school? Where the school program that someone might be coming from, whatever that might be. And it might just be your kid did really lousy when it was remote learning, and then when they were
Right.
back in person, they took off, right? And
Sure.
that's something to think about as we think about a student's growth and how they've matured over this moment that we're all navigating, right?
Hmm.
So trying to look for those honors classes and just even saying, okay, if I have a good freshman year, what does sophomore year look like, right? And
Right.
sometimes it's, what is my pathway in math? Both of those are okay conversations to have. And really, school counselors love having those conversations, right? Like
Right.
we like it when a kid takes ownership and self-advocates and says, I think I know what I want to do. Let's balance that with what this school offers and what I think my path is going to be.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I think that's extremely helpful to hear. And in your experience, some students are like, "Yep,
Yeah.
this is what I want to do in college," and so I guess it's a little more straightforward, for lack of better words.
Mhm.
But others, it's kind of understanding, what were the middle school years looking like? How does that transition, kind of balancing what
Mhm.
can be absorbed? And you make such a great point about kind of the transitionary period right now, right? And being hybrid and coming, and it's just a whole new kind of set of
Right.
rules and considerations, as students are kind of transitioning from middle into high school.
Right.
So speaking of that transition, beyond classes, middle school to high school, it's a big step for students and families. Um, you kind of were eighth grade, and you're top of the totem pole, I guess, for lack of better words, and then you're kind of transitioning to high school. And at CM, obviously, as a 7th through 12th grade, it's one experience, but we know that many students might go from a middle school to a completely separate high school.
Yep.
But, I guess outside the classroom, how should middle school students and parents really think about their transition? How should they prepare? And in your experience, are there any common areas that students have trouble with or encounter as they're transitioning from middle to high school?
The advice that I give parents of freshman students all the time is something is going to go wrong this year,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
And we don't know if that thing is going to go wrong in September, or we don't know if
Right.
it's going to go wrong in April, right? And as we're talking about this moment, kid goes into quarantine for 10 days and it knocks them
Right.
off. Like, how are you going to get caught up on your work? That's a consideration that we have now that we didn't have 3 years ago. But
Right.
in the normal times,
Hmm.
you're always going to have a friend group changes a little bit. In a school like
Yep.
CM, roughly half of our students enter in the 9th grade. So we have students in 7th and 8th, but then
Sure.
there's this influx in 9th. And so at a lot of schools, you're just going to see new friend groups building. And
Hmm.
that can be a very stressful time in an adolescent's life. We have students who are still kind of acting like 7th and 8th graders when they're 9th graders, and that's okay.
Hmm.
And we have 9th graders who are called up to varsity teams and they start hanging out with 11th and 12th graders, right?
Sure.
And that tension between, am I moving up? Am I moving down? Maybe the kid who's on the varsity team with the 11th and 12th graders really wants to go play, Minecraft with his friends and hang out with kids who are a little bit younger sometimes. But there's that push and that pressure to try to fit in with the older kids. And what the most common kind of obstacle I see with students that freshman year is we start to see almost that sense of imposter syndrome of like,
Yeah.
everyone else has this figured out, but I don't. And that classic adolescent moment of, I'm the only one who's experiencing these problems and I'm experiencing them so deeply, nobody else could possibly get what I'm doing. When the reality is, those kids who are acting like the 7th and 8th graders might be having some very high level conversations with parents or with teachers, and everything goes back and forth. And then we start to see kids growing out of that in their junior year where they say, man, did I struggle my freshman year? And somebody else says, really, I was struggling with the exact same thing. And that's when they start to grow into those whole people. So I think the way to navigate that is with patience, right? And it is, because you're in high school and because you know that transcript is going to be looked at by a college, all of a sudden, you get a B on a test and it feels like the world is crashing in. Like, oh my gosh, is my son or daughter still going to be able to go to college? And like, obviously, yeah, like you don't have to worry about a bad second quarter in your student's freshman year. I mean, that's why I said before, some colleges don't look at freshman year. There's going to be bumps, and whatever those bumps may be, just kind of accepting where they are, but also having that parental sense kind of like, this feels larger than a bump, that this feels, going back to that idea of burnout. High school is also a time where shifting friend groups can also be a point of concern, right? Like having a conversation with someone at the school or someone that you trust in your orbit to just kind of double check those moments of, this is what I'm seeing. Are you seeing that too? Am I overreacting? Are you underreacting? Like all of that. That's the way that we kind of shepherd our students through that moment, because you do want to give them more independence and you do want to let them find themselves, but you don't want to do that to their own detriment where you completely step away and let them fall off. So, and I know that's a very kind of like short Venn diagram that I'm throwing out,
right.
But when you have good people in your corner, when you can talk to a school counselor that you trust, you start building that relationship. We're a school that school counselors stay with a student 9 through 12 and they help in the college counseling and advising process, right? And so ultimately, a lot of those moments of struggle in freshman year end up being the moments of growth that we talk about in a counselor letter, where we say, hey, the student came in, things were a little off. This is how they found their path, and this is how they experienced that growth that led them to what their ultimate passion or, what their path is going to be. So patience is tough in those moments. And especially like we're a private school when people pay tuition. As soon as that starts happening, there's a little bit of pressure of, did we make the right choice as our family? Have that conversation, right? And I think that try to have that conversation before it reaches panic level, but just have that conversation of, this doesn't seem to be what we thought it was going to be. How are we still working together here? Because we do, when a student comes in 9th grade, we have a great retention rate. We want our students to come and stay. We're not just, it's not a meat market where we pull everybody in. They're part of our community and we want to take care of them. So use us as a partner in that pathway.
I think that patience piece is so important, right? It's understanding that it's a big transition for everyone, as you said, and you're gonna hit bumps in the road. I mean, that's such a good way. It's not if, but when, right? And so kind of mentally preparing for that, and it is a lot of that out of the classroom type stuff, and I think that's can sometimes, in a sense, maybe be more difficult to deal with classrooms are, cut and dry with grades and things of that nature. I think it's kind of everything else that students are experiencing. And so I think that's, great advice, the patience and speaking with folks in your corner and working with the counselor at schools and just kind of checking in. I think that's so important.
Yeah.
So Jack, this has been great. Thank you so much for all of the great information about, how middle school students and families can be exposed to college, some of the things that how they can continue to explore their interests. For younger families, the focus areas, kind of focusing on transition. So before we let you go, any final words of advice for middle school students and parents as they really kind of start their early college exploration process?
Yeah, I mean, try the best you can to appreciate and enjoy the experience, right?
Okay.
That you have raised a dynamic and interesting child that you care about deeply, that you love them and you want the absolute best for them. And there's the short-term patience of just leaning into the mess that is the middle school years,
Right.
and the long-term, the benefits of watching your child grow into who they are meant to be and what they're going to do. And I don't think, if you talk to my parents or your parents, Jonathan, I don't think they would have picked out at seventh grade what we would be doing 30 years later,
Mhm.
right? So it's letting those things evolve and change and happen, and just being a great supporting resource for them as they're on that journey, and walking alongside them, and seeing where it goes, because their path is going to be as unique and dynamic and as special as your child is. So it's it is a privilege to be able to do this work, to be a small part of what students get to experience and what families get to experience in that time. So the more partners that you can find to pull in, that you trust and you enjoy working with, I think the better experience that you're going to have.
Jack, great words of advice to leave us with, and appreciate the time once again. Want to thank everyone for viewing again our Learn from the Expert video series. Be sure to check out the next video, and we're constantly bringing you new topics on a variety of college planning, saving, and financing topics. If you want to learn more about Private College 529 Plan, I encourage you to visit our website, privatecollege529.com. If you'd like to learn a little bit more about Catholic Memorial, you can visit catholicmemorial.org to learn a little bit more about their offerings at CM. So again, thank you all for joining, and we'll see you at the next one.